Okay, so we have to start because we're live. Okay, so let's start with the رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين اللهم علمنا بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا أصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما نويت التعلم والتعليم والنفع انتفاع التذكر التذكير والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وادعو على الهدى دعوة الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. So just really quick, this last part of the dua that I did, it's called the intention for the student of knowledge. And if anybody wants me to send it to them, just let me know, because it's written by Imam al-Haddad. He wrote it specifically for the student of knowledge because, you know, there's a hadith that your actions are by your intentions. Like whatever reward you get is based on the intention you make. And so Allah Ta'ala doesn't necessarily need a lot from us, but He needs a good, strong intention. So Imam al-Haddad wrote this so that you could do something like even like a 10-minute class, 15-minute class, or something just really, you know, something simple, reviewing your notes or something, that you make this intention and inshallah you get the reward for making the intention that, Ya Allah, I'm doing this to, you know, I'm going to share with people, increase in my knowledge and take it out to other people, and then there's a lot more, and it's desirous of your pleasure and all that. So it's important. I try to do that. The important thing is to maintain my presence when I'm doing it. So, but at least, you know, it's on the tongue, alhamdulillah. So that was for one. The slides are in draft form, so I prefer that, I know sometimes people like to take pictures, so I would prefer that you take notes if you can. Sometimes people take pictures. So, and that's the only thing I have with pictures is if I make a mistake and I go back and correct the slide, then I'm worried that, you know, then they have the incorrect information. So, but feel free to take notes. So the reason I decided to do these classes is that Allah Ta'ala says, we tell you the stories of the Prophet. So this is from the Quran, to make your heart firm. And in these accounts, truth has come to you as lessons and reminders for the believers. So I put in italics your heart firm because the Prophet's heart was stronger than anybody else's heart, right? And still Allah Ta'ala says to make your heart firm. So as in fiqh classes, they'll say min babin ola, meaning the proof is stronger that our hearts should be made firm, right? And so, and that's why, and I think, especially I think in this day and age, I mean, I personally feel those stories really help me stay motivated. Traditionally, what they would do is from a very, very young age, they would have people, children, listen to these stories. And even my mom, she tells me like they were, you know, her brother, like she had 4 brothers, and they would tell her stories and stories. And I heard this amazing story about Imam Malik that he, one of his greatest, he had over 600 teachers. One of his teachers, he would, Imam Malik would come to him and he would just tell him stories. He would like close the curtains and just tell him stories of the early community. And Imam Malik, and he would weep, his teacher. I think it was Rabi al-Rai. And that, imagine like having a teacher where you have to make dua, like you say, Tawfiq, to be like that. That he would just cry. And so imagine, like, as a young person, what effect that would have on your heart, and how strongly rooted your heart would be if you have a teacher like that from a very, very young age. And they say Imam Malik, like Sheikh Hamza was telling us, in the area of Medina where, all the masjid that is now what was Medina during the Prophet's time. So all that area that has that boundary wall, that was all Medina. That was the extent of what was called Medina back then. So Imam Malik wouldn't wear shoes, or just out of his adab. And that can, because people are like, wow, that's so difficult, it's so hot, and the sand gets hot. And you can only do that if the love is really, really strong. Like I was like, wow, I'd love to do that. But it's, and I realized that, okay, I need to work on my love. Because you can't explain stuff like that. Just like a mother will stay up all night, right, for her child. Now, for those of us that don't have kids, it's a little bit harder but it's the thing of love, right? And the deen, and I feel we need to really bring that back to help us stay rooted in the deen. Okay, so this was my intention for it. Okay, a miracle. So in Arabic, they differentiate between different types of miracles. So miracles is technically a breaking of the norm. So something that happens out of the ordinary. That doesn't ordinarily happen, but the intellect can understand. Like it's something that the intellect can that it's possible for the intellect to imagine, right? And when you say mu'jiza in Arabic, you're talking about something that happens to a prophet specifically. Because if it happens to a righteous person, something that's out of the ordinary, like, the righteous were known to like fly on carpets and things like that. And if they're a practicing person, then you'll call that a karama. Now in English, we'll call it all miracles, right? But in Arabic, in Aqidah classes, they differentiate, right? Okay, so defies the laws of this world as placed by Allah. Yukhalif sunnat al-Qur'an, that just means like Allah, just like we have all these laws, right, in any country you're in, Allah Ta'ala has His own laws, and that's like, they'll say that's His sunnah, right, that's Allah Ta'ala's way, because the original meaning of sunnah is the way, right? So a mu'jiza will happen at the hands of someone who's claiming prophecy, otherwise it's not called a mu'jiza. In English you'll call it a miracle, it's called a karama, and there's I have a 2-volume book on the karamat of the awliya, the miracles of the special friends of Allah. It's really amazing. I have to be careful about not opening this, because then I don't want to read other stuff, because it's so beautiful. But, okay, I'm going to skip some of this. Okay. So importance of studying Sira and miracles. If you want openings in one's life, meaning if you want, we want to get close to Allah, we want to, you look at the early community and how, they could study, all these amazing books in a very short period of time. Like Sheikh Samir, who is one of my teachers, he's one of the leading Hanafi fiqh scholars, he said that until the age of about 18, all he knew, they knew their deen, because in Damascus, when they say all I knew, it's very relative. He said, I just knew the seerah, the life of the Prophet Muhammad, really well. And so he has this deep love for the Prophet, very, very deep love. And when you see his practice, it's amazing. But that's from his love. Because he said, that's what I primarily knew. And he said he feels that because of that, that's why now he's teaching. He's one of the leading teachers of Hanafi fiqh in the main institute there. He was teaching 3rd, 4th year college. Hanafi fiqh was very advanced, buying and selling and all the rules related to that. And I'm just amazed at, if you do a Google search of him and some of what my teachers have said about him, it's just really amazing. And they say in terms of his sleeping at night and one time they asked him, he said, because I have a blessed wife. That's one of the other reasons. Yeah, she's very blessed. She's his father. Her father was his teacher of Quran. Sheikh Samir, Sheikh Samir. Yes, yeah. He's been coming actually.
Right.
Yeah, the one who came in. So his knowledge and his stories are amazing. He pulls them out of all. Alhamdulillah, I've been blessed to be studying for 20 years, and I'm hearing stories that and it really, and he'll pull stuff out, and it's wow, I needed that particular story for this thing in my heart, and it's just amazing. So So famous scholar Imam al-Awza'i said Imam al-Awza'i was knowledgeable in Sunnah but not Hadith, like the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? But not in Hadith, like the Prophet said so and he said this, like the books of Hadith. He was not as knowledgeable, but he knew probably knew fiqh really well, like the practice, right? Imam Sufyan al-Thawri knew hadith, like the Sahih Bukhari knows hadith, but he didn't know the sunnah as well, so he wouldn't know fiqh as well, like the practice. Imam Malik knew both, and so he had a very deep connection to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And now we're still following his school of thought. There were many other schools of thought, but those other ones died out. Right now that we're just down to two, and that's our connection to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these unbroken connection that we have, because these schools of thought didn't die out. Does that make sense? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, so whatever you're busy, this scares you a little bit. Whatever you're busy with in this life, that's what you're going to be busy with in the next life. And there's a hadith that a person was with the one he loved, right? The Prophet said that. So it's a matter of the heart. And the Sahaba asked, like they were also learning, are there horses in Jannah? And the Prophet said yes, but they're going to have wings. And in Medina they used to do agriculture, so they were asking, is there going to be agriculture in heaven? And the Prophet said, so he was answering them. Obviously it's not going to be anything like it is here, right? And then he told Abu Huraira, right, who was a companion who became Muslim last few years of the Prophet's life, and he would just follow the Prophet around, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he said, the Prophet said to me, if you want to be with me in the hereafter, he told him three things. He said, shawq is like a deep yearning, like a ishtiqaq, like it's very a deep. It's more than muhabba. Have a deep yearning, which if I told Yelda, oh Yelda, I love you, and she's like, well, how well do you know me, right? How, like, especially if, I've known Yelda now for 6 years, 7, 8 years, but maybe when we first met, and if I said that, she's like, well, you don't really know me, right? How can you claim that? It's just a claim, right? So part of us loving the Prophet ﷺ is getting to know him, and follow my sunnah, right? So follow his practice. And salawat, praying upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, praying upon him, and Allah Ta'ala said, if you pray upon the Prophet one time, right, Allah prays on that person 10 times, which means His mercy comes down, right? And he said that as far as the fear, I said what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was fearful for. He said, I'm not worried about, what do most people worry about in this life? For themselves, and if not, when they become parents, what do they worry about? About their children, what do they usually worry about? Finances, right? And the majority of Muslims are not different, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ knows people, and he said, I don't fear, well, he said a couple of things. He said, I don't fear that you'll associate partners with me, right? La akhafu an tushriku bi, that you believe in the oneness of Allah, and that he wasn't fearful of that. But he said, I'm afraid that the world, the dunya will open up for you. So material possessions will open up for you. And you will vie with each other over it, right? Somebody has a big car, and so I want that car. I want it for, maybe you don't want it for yourself, but you want it for your children, right? So-and-so, I see so-and-so's children having a big house, or they have this and that, so I want it for my children. And so he said, I fear that the material possessions, the world will open up for you. And you'll vie with each other, you'll compete with each other, just like as the communities before you, right? Because the Islam, it combines all the other religions, right? It's like that new model, right? An old model, like a washing machine, then there's a new model. So Islam includes all the other religions. So he said, I'm afraid that you'll vie in it like the people before you, and it'll destroy you like it destroyed the people before you. Yeah. So, and the way, and especially now, we have a huge test, right? Our test is so much of material, like we're living, like my teachers say that we're living like kings, even those of us that live in simple apartments, and we think, oh, we don't, but we're told that we're living like how kings lived previously. And one of my teachers said he visited he went to the house of the king of Arabia, and he said like there's people here that have like bigger homes, and so all that's possible, a potential accountability, right? And so how do we get out of that? Because the Prophet said he said one of the fitna means a test. He was one of the fitnas he was worried about is fitna as-sarra. Usually the test that we worry about is what? Like what are the tribulations we worry about? Money, right? He was fitnat health. He was worried about fitnat as-sarra. It's mentioned in the hadith. Fitnat as-sarra is the fitna, the test of ease, right? Of having good health, of having money. Because he said, if you wake up in the morning and you have three things, it's not, I'm like, sorry, you can't complain because you have these three things. If you have safety in your home, right? There's people who are being bombed, right? And if you have food for a day, what's the third one? And I think the third one is health. Doesn't it? One is safety in your home, one is food for a day, and there is a third one. And then it's like you have the world at your feet. And the third one, we all have that. It's either faith or health or something similar, like something very basic that we just take for granted. So the way to like pull ourselves away from material possessions, especially with Amazon and internet, and like you can just buy stuff online, because a lot of times people will be like, don't do this, don't do that, and then you're like, well, but the human being doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? So the early community, they are filling the hearts of the Muslims with these stories, because when the heart is filled with one thing, then it doesn't have the other. So if I tell you don't do this, that, and the other, and it's like, well, but what do I fill it with then, right? So that's like, as teachers, I was like, okay, we need to take this out more so that the other stuff will naturally go away, inshallah. Okay. So there's a narration from the Prophet. When we say hadith, we mean a narration about the Prophet. Whoever is absent from an event and is pleased with it, it is as if he attended it. And whoever attended the event and hated it, it is as if he is not a part of that gathering. Meaning, so how would you relate that to us? What were we absent from that Allah didn't decree for us? Right, we weren't there in his age, right? And the Prophet said the best age is my community. And the best, he means not wealth-wise, but he means like character-wise, faith-wise, right? So he said the best community is my community, and then the one that came after, and the one that came after, right? So he said, and he also said that whoever's absent, we weren't there, right? But if we wanted to be there, and we yearn to be there, then it's as if we are with them. But there were people during the Prophet ﷺ's time who were there, right? But they didn't have they were tribulated with not having the pleasure of being with him. And so it's as if they were absent. So we shouldn't feel bad. And a lot of times, they're like, oh wow, I wish we had been there. But that's a blessing too, because maybe the tests that we would have been given with, majority of the times, even the non-Muslims, they didn't have enough food for the day. They didn't have enough clothes. They would cover each other up. Like there's one Sahabi, he would go and pray in the masjid and he would run back home, and they asked him, he said, my wife and I, we don't have enough clothing, so I run back to give her my clothing so that she can pray. That's like, and this was even for the non-Muslims. So, and it was later in the Prophet ﷺ's life that material, more wealth started coming in, and the Muslims had more. And some of them maintained a very ascetic standard, and some of them, they opened up more. So that was, but they didn't have that test of having to say no, because Allah Ta'ala made, didn't give them that choice. So وَأَشْتَاقَ إِلَى إِخْوَانِي, how much I yearn for my brothers and sisters. Okay, there's another narration that says, a lot of you have probably heard how much I yearn for my brothers and sisters from our hadith. And the Sahaba said that, oh, aren't we your brothers? And I added the sisters because it's included. And the Prophet said, no, you are my companions. But he mentioned the brothers and sisters are the ones who are going to come after, right? And they would give anything to just be with me, right? In another narration, he called us ahbabi, my beloveds. And I was like, oh, so just knowing that the Prophet even before we were born, before Allah Ta'ala created us, he was already, his care for us and his love for us was already there. And he was saying, my ahbabi, my beloved. So make us from those who can, give it back to where, because he's already loving us. And then Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, he was known as the Saifullah. He was like a very brilliant general. He was brilliant. He was sent to a tribe to call them to Islam. And the Prophet said, don't fight them, just call them to Islam. And they accepted Islam, right? There's no compulsion, so he talked to them. And he began teaching them, and there was no fighting. And then so they said, describe the Prophet, right? And that's really important, especially if you have children, like describe the Prophet to them. And he said, should I go into details or be brief, right? Because sometimes you do a long class, and sometimes, you just want to do a short class, right? Depending on what people might get bored. So they said be brief, right? Maybe they were warriors, they had tough lives. So he said, this is so brilliant what he said. He said the messenger, meaning the person who was sent, is in accordance with the one who sent him. Who sent the Prophet? Allah sent him. God sent him, right? So his perfection is in accordance with how Allah sent him. Like, that should be enough for you to know. And these are people, because if somebody lives with you, and they see you all the time, what's going to happen? What are they going to see? The good and the bad, right? And Sayyidina Ali, who was the Prophet's cousin and who was with him from a very early age, he said, I've never seen anybody like him before him, nor anybody after him. Because the Prophet even told his wives, like one of the wives, she actually said something. Somebody asked her a question and she went and she explained it. And then she said, should I talk about this? And the Prophet said, yes, go ahead. So they were describing things that were happening in the homes of the Prophet that normally you wouldn't talk about. And they wept. I have a slide on what happened when the Prophet passed away, and how all the Medina was crying. Like, they were so struck by that. Imagine just knowing, and this is somebody you lived with, you've seen him inside out, and yet you can't find any fault with him. No fault. In fact, Abu Jahl, he's known as, the Prophet said he's the Fir'aun of this ummah, right? He's the Fir'aun of this ummah. He said in a narration, it's not that we disbelieve in you, like he had a moment of enlightenment. He said, it's not we disbelieve in you. We're not saying you're lying, but we disbelieve in what you've brought. It's like that's stubbornness. Okay, he couldn't get, it's like, okay, the truth, you don't disbelieve. He just, because there was nothing. And Abu Jahl, he was known as Abu al-Hakam. A lot of times people would think, the people that fought the Prophet, they had no good characteristics. No, they had good characteristics. But it's just their stubbornness to not give up their old values. Because if you grow up with certain things, right? And I've seen us, as those of us that grew up as Muslims, and then we started learning the deen later on in our lives, there's things that are like, oh man, it's very difficult to, so like, well, what about this? Well, maybe it's not true. Maybe this, the nafs comes and tries to make excuses. And then I think sometimes, especially when I hear these things about the people who went against the Prophet, I'm like, okay, Sire, that's just stubbornness. And that's how they were, the people who fought the Prophet. You know what I mean? So when that's happening, like what our teachers said to do is to say, okay, just admit to Allah, because Allah loves to hear excuses. The Prophet ﷺ said Allah loves to hear excuses. So I'm like, Allah, this is just really hard for me right now. right? Just say that. Like, Ya Allah, okay, I heard it, I read this, I was taught this, but I'm working on it, right? It's a work in progress. They say men in progress on the street, right, when they're doing side work on the street. So that is to not having the stubbornness to say, okay, well, I know it's right, but no, I'm not going to believe it. No, that's the first step is to say, I know it's right, and I'm working on it, Ya Allah, and I'm trying, right? Because then Allah will give you the opening to actually do it. So the later Muslims, they asked Sayyidina Ali, who was the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, and he was one of the first Muslims, right? They say he was the first boy Muslim. And they said, how do you have so much of the character of the Prophet ﷺ? Like when they say inherited, the prophets don't leave any inheritance, right? The Prophet ﷺ didn't leave any inheritance. He had no money in the house. He said, he was the first amongst us to join him. They didn't ask Sayyidina Ali, they asked somebody else. So the Sahaba, the companion said he was the first amongst to join the Prophet. The Prophet had other cousins, but Sayyidina Ali was the first to join him from the cousins, and first boy, and the most attached to him, right? In fact, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, who was the son of Sayyidina Umar, like he was also very attached to the Prophet ﷺ. So he would do, one day he did this thing, like he was riding on his animal, and he just did like he was on the street, and he took his animal around and then kept going. They said, why did you do that? And he said, I saw the Prophet doing that. And they said, well, but there used to be a stone there. And he said, it doesn't matter. Right? I mean, I'm sure he knew, right? He said, it doesn't matter. And you can't explain those things logically, because that was their love for him. And that's why when you read the stories and how deeply connected they were, and how they could, they could give away all this money, and they could do all these things, and you're like, wow, that's so amazing that they could do that. But that was because of their love. But they saw so much of the Prophet, and they would ask each other, what did he do here? What did he do there? One's companion, he actually walked from, I don't know if he walked the whole way, from, I don't know if it was Iraq or somewhere, or Medina, all the way to Damascus, just to get one hadith, one narration from another companion. And he'd heard it himself, but he wanted to hear it in a different way. And he went all the way to, and that was like their connection to the Prophet. Okay, whoever revives one of my sunnahs, so one of my ways, is a lover of me, and whoever loves me, right, will be with me in Jannah, right? So it's really important. And sometimes when you start doing something, the love may not be there, right? The ego might be kicking and screaming a little bit, right? And so sometimes when you're feeling like that, you should pick up a book and read something about the Prophet, and that one, listen to something, so it's like, oh wow, yeah, I really want to be with him, and that really helps. Or to do salawat, right, and that really helps. So whoever revives one of my sunnahs, one of my ways, like a lot of times, we've given up shaking hands, for example, when you see each other, and that was one of the things that the people from Yemen, they were practicing that, and when they came to Medina to visit the Prophet ﷺ, he acknowledged that, so then it became a sunnah. He really liked that they did that. And now you know that when you greet somebody, same gender, obviously, you greet somebody and you shake hands, what happens? What's one of the things that happen? Connection, right? And what is it hard to do when you... Huh? Let go. It's easy. You have to let go stuff, right? I mean, there's some of the teachers actually in Yemen, in one of the schools that they have, like every day, I don't know if it's every day or every week, I think it's every day, they make all the students shake hands with each other. And so maybe first day you'll do it begrudgingly, second day it's like, okay, it's not so bad. Third day you're like, okay, whatever, I get over it. So they'll force you to where you have to get along, like get over it. But they do it in a subtle way, and that's one of the things that the shaking of hands does. So if you go into a gathering and there's other people, just if you start that, in whatever gathering you're in, inshallah you'll get the reward for reviving that, and it's a sign of your love. So Allah Ta'ala describes the disbelievers that they know him as they know their children. So do we know, these are the not people who didn't believe in the Prophet during his time. They knew him, and one of the Jews who actually becomes Muslim, they ask him about, because the Prophet is described very well in the other scriptures, in the Bible, in the original Bible, in the previous scriptures. So they asked Abdullah bin Salam, who was one of the head Jewish rabbis who becomes Muslim, and they said, is that true that you know him as well as, and he's like, we know him better than we know our children. Because he said he was like really frank, he said, because my children, there's always that possibility that the mother could have gone to somebody else, right? He's not my child, there's always that possibility. But we know that this prophet is the prophet of the end of time. Like, that's how well the prophet was described in the other books. That when they saw him, they could tell that those were all the descriptions. So love is not, this is something Shaykh Islam said, who said, love is simply not what is innate, but a spiritual experience and striving. Meaning it's like, there are certain things that Allah Ta'ala has put in us, right? Love for our kids, right? That parents will do. I mean, you see, whether people are practicing a faith or not, they will have. If they're generally good people, love for their children, they'll take it. I mean, somebody has to be really, really sick to do horrible things to their children, right? Most people will take care of their children, irrespective of their faith, right? But so some of it is innate, right? But some of it is, you have to struggle, you have to work at it, right? We may not, people we don't know, people that speak a different language, that are, right, a different race, grew up in a different country. There's more things that are different, right? So maybe the love or the camaraderie is not as innate, but that's the one thing that Islam does. It's breaking down those barriers, right? Because there was a European Sahabi, there were black Sahaba, there were of all different races and different ethnic groups, right? Shafi, okay, I'm gonna skip some of this. Let's see. Okay, when the Prophet migrated to Medina, so he went from Mecca to Medina, he migrated. A Jewish man on a palm tree, right? Remember, the Jews knew him as well as their kids. Yeah, he was on the palm tree, and he saw. Allah Ta'ala had it to where he saw, because the Sahaba would come out every day, and they would wait for the Prophet until it would get really hot, and then they would go back, because they were waiting, no cell phones or anything, right? They were waiting for the Prophet to come. And Allah Ta'ala had it to where a Jewish man saw him, and he yells out. He's like, Ya Bani Qayla. Bani Qayla were the Ansar, were the Aus and the Khazraj. Their ancestor was Bani Qayla. They were all from Bani Qayla, because they were from two brothers, but they've been fighting. The Aus and the Khazraj were the Ansar of Medina. They were originally from two brothers, but there had been so much fighting. He said, so the Jewish person said, Ya Bani Qayla, hada haddukum. Had means your portion, like luck, we say good luck. So that's our, hada haddukum. This is your portion from the prophets, right? Allah Ta'ala gave us the prophet. We could have been from the other communities, right? But Allah Ta'ala made us from his community. And the Prophet said, I am your portion from the other prophets, and then we are his portion from the communities, right? So we have to raise ourselves up, because he's the final messenger, and in his message is included all the messages. And the Prophet said, Anna awla nasi bi al-muttaqun haythu ma kanu. I love this hadith, gives me so much hope. The people most worthy of my company are the ones who are most God conscious. Haythu ma kanu, wherever they may be, and whoever, so it doesn't matter what generation, could be thousands of years later, but we could be with the Prophet, as long as we have that God consciousness. And the God consciousness goes back to just having love for him. That's where it helps to hold on to the deen. And then the one most worthy of my companionship is the one who prays upon me the most. And the Prophet said, the foremost upon me, foremost are in every generation of my community. Um, and so, because Allah Ta'ala mentions this, the Sabiqun, al-Muqarrabun, the ones who are closest to Allah. And so the Prophet says that in every community there's going to be, in every age there's going to be Sabiqun, outstrippers, meaning the people with the best character. And in those days, they would compete to live closer to the masjid, to have physical, to be closer physically. Why? Because then you can go more often. And for us, how can we do that? Because the Prophet is not there. But who are the inheritors of the prophets? The scholars, right? So if you have people in your community, you want to take advantage of that, because that will help us be from the outstrippers. If you know somebody who's a lover of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like be with them. If there were two, I'll come to this slide. Maybe I can fast forward. Yeah. Oh, here it's the next slide. There were two. There was in the Masjid of the Prophet, when he came out of he had a small room. Hujra means actually like an elevated room. He came out of I would say the Aisha's room, because he didn't have his own room. Like we all have our own rooms now. The Prophet came out of his apartment, and there were two circles of gathering. One was they were remembering Allah, right? And the other one, they were actually studying, basically. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said both of you are in good, right? So the people that say, oh, you should leave groups if they're in all that. He said both of you are in good. And he said, yet I was commanded to do this. I mean, he was sent as a teacher. The Prophet ﷺ said, I was sent as a teacher, right? So the second group, in a narration, they say the Prophet ﷺ asked them, what are you reviewing? Because they said, we're reviewing, we're studying. And they said that we're mentioning what a great blessing it is that you were sent to us. Like they were doing the Shama'il. So it's like, and the Shama'il needs to be, a lot of times people, as we'll study the events of the Sirah chronologically, but we don't study the Shama'il, which is the description of the Prophet. And that's what this other group was doing in this other narration. They were describing, they were talking about what a great blessing it was to, and I think sometimes we should do that. Like, okay, what are some of the blessings that come to us from being Muslim, right? Just in this world, okay, if we make it to the next world, right, and we're saved, right? That's another blessing. Just from being Muslim in this world, what are some of the blessings that come to us? So, I'm going to show this. Okay, so when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, actually I'll mention the first thing. When you hear hadith, like a saying, a narration of the Prophet ﷺ, which either could be his narration, it could be his own, or something he did, or something that was done in his presence that he established, that he didn't say. Because if something was done in the presence of the Prophet and it wasn't permissible, he would have to say something. So I was like, oh gosh, Allah forgive me for all the times things are done, or people said stuff, they backed it, or something, and I didn't say anything. So the Sayyidina Ali and Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who are very, very early companions. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who most of the Hanafi madhab comes from, he was a very early companion. He was a shepherd, and he was from the first few Muslims. And they said, both of them said, when you hear a hadith, then think of that which is the most guided. So anything you hear about the Prophet, put it into context of what? Something that's the most guided. Does that make sense? And the most atqa means most God conscious. and the most seemly, most handsome. Meaning, don't think of it as our actions, right? Think of it as whatever, any action or anything about the Prophet. Keep these three things in mind, right? So if the Prophet ﷺ got angry, his anger is not going to be like our anger, because he was the most guided. So his anger was always for Allah. Like, he never got angry for him, his personal, like his own ego, right? He never, if any, the famous story of the Bedouin who yanked the Prophet's cloak and there was marks left, right? And then Sayyidina Umar got upset with him, right? And he was asking for a debt to be paid off, and the time hadn't come for that debt to be paid off. But they say he was also checking to see how forbearant the Prophet was, because that was one of his descriptions in the other books, that he was a very forbearant Prophet. So that was a test. And so the Prophet said that he told Sayyidina Umar to go take care of his debt and give him a little bit more. Why? Because you scared him. So that's like harming him. But he gave up his own right of what this man did to him, and he becomes Muslim. So anything you hear about the Prophet, think of, anytime you hear a hadith, think of that which is most
godliness.
It's good to keep this in. Most handsome, most seemly, most beautiful. Like when you think about when the Prophet ﷺ would turn, like he wouldn't physically turn like we turn. Like he would completely turn his body. When he would get angry, he would never raise his voice. Right? They say he wouldn't raise his voice in the marketplace. Meaning, sometimes in the marketplace, people will raise their voice. So somebody who doesn't do it even in the marketplace, they're certainly not going to do it in the house, in the circle of gathering. Now people are yelling in the masjid of the Prophet, like they have loudspeakers, and they, Sheikh Salman was saying, when they rebuilt the masjid of the Prophet, they had, like, when the Ottomans did that, they had, like, I don't know, a very, very, was it 1 meter inch thick cotton that they had placed as a barrier, so that all the construction would not be heard, like would be muffled, just out of, because say the Aisha, when some of the Sahaba were alive, if people were, and they didn't have loudspeakers, but if people were raising their voices, they would say, you're hurting the Prophet, you're harming him, like lower your voices. So, and the stuff that goes on, Allah forgive us for that. So Al-Ajwad, this Al-Ajwad, Allah is the most generous. Ana ajwadu bani Adam, and I am the most generous of Bani Adam, right? And the most generous after me is the one who acquires Islamic knowledge and spreads it. And the Prophet ﷺ was materially generous, right? He gave away, he would just give stuff away. One time after Isha, he just rushed back into the room. And I think they asked him, or he told them, I think they asked him, and he had a little bit of gold or silver in his home, and he didn't want to sleep with that. Because why? Because sleep would come, and then one doesn't wake up, right? And so he didn't want to sleep with that, and so he gave it away before he slept. So he was the most generous materially. Well, but for those of us who, that's a struggle for. I mean, we struggle with, giving out. They say to get rid of that materialism, to give out a little bit, with that, and certainly with that intention of I'm giving a little bit of charity with the intention that to get rid of my stinginess. And like the righteous will say, oh, Allah put the dunya, material possessions, in our hands and not in our hearts. So, and then share knowledge, share your knowledge, share whatever you've learned, right? And that's a type of generosity, because it takes time, it takes review. Somebody could be going out and working, and then they're sharing their money, or that time that they're spending working, you're spending is sharing knowledge. Right? And so when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, look at how they were vigilant about wanting to be with the Prophet, even though he had passed away. I feel bad he's sitting like that. He said, Sayyidina Aus ibn Khawli, he said, because the Sayyidina Ali was in charge of burying the Prophet, so doing the washing, and because when somebody passes away, and this is the sunnah, that it's the family that does it, right? So Sayyidina Ali was doing the washing. And so he said, give me a portion. He remembered the hadith, like, give me a portion. Rasulullah is our portion. We're from his ummah, so give me that portion. So Sayyidina Ali let him in, but he didn't let him partake in the duties of the washing. Then he said, when they were burying him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, give me some of the portion of the Prophet. So they let him in when they were burying the Prophet, because the Prophet said a prophet is always buried where they die, because all the prophets are given a choice. The angel of death, when he comes, he gives choices only to the prophets. The rest of us, when we go, we go. Allah have us go in a good way. So the Prophet was given a choice, and he chose to be with Allah. And so then when they were lowering his blessed body, Aus ibn Khawli said, give me that, I want that portion. Right? So they were vigilant about whatever they could get. Okay, well, I wasn't, I got this much when the Prophet was alive, or none of it, but I'm just going to get whatever else I can, right? And so that's why I have certain teachers, when they're in the area, I'm like, whatever, I'll just, I make a lot of dua, Allah open it up for me and facilitate it for me. But I'll stop other things, because I know that this is my portion, because this is my connection, people that connected to the people, taking it all back to the prophets. Let's do some. Has everybody heard the story of the hypocrite? The hypocrite? Has everybody heard this one?
I know I've heard it, but I'm not.
You've heard it? Okay.
I've heard it. I mean,
here, let me tell you. Oh, I love this one. I love this. This is so sweet. There was a companion from the Ansar. So they used to have some rights. Some of the rights that they had, like Hajj rights, some of the rights they had, like pre-Islam and after Islam, like they had ghusl even pre-Islam. They didn't have wudu, right? But they had ghusl. So they would make ghusl from the greater ritual impurity even before Islam. So even some of the people fighting the Prophet Islam, they would do ghusl after when they were in greater ritual impurity. So one of the things they would do Hajj, right? But they would do Hajj unclothed, completely naked, right? So they had this other practice where they would, once they got into a state of ihram, of pilgrimage, so even they were going for Hajj or for Umrah, they would not, they wouldn't enter their homes like through the front door, right? They would enter through the back door, through the roof. There was all kinds of different narrations that I heard. Anyway, they would enter through the front door. So this Ansar is going to be he's going to be a Muslim, a companion from Medina, right? So the Prophet ﷺ entered through the front door, and he was in ihram. This was the Sulh Hudaybiyah, when the Muslims were stopped from entering. And so the Prophet ﷺ was in ihram to go for Umrah. And so he entered through the front door, and the Ansar just followed him and entered through the front door. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him, he said, why did you do that, And he said, because you did that, right? That was how strong their love was. And the Prophet said, I'm from a group of people, the Ahmas. The Ahmas was, you've heard that word, Hamas? You've heard the word Hamas. Hamas is like shidda, like holding on to something very strongly. So they strongly held on to the belief that they didn't practice this particular practice of not entering through the front door. Does that make sense? So the Quraysh and some of the other tribes, they didn't have this practice. And so you can see the Prophet ﷺ, he's doing certain practices that where Allah Ta'ala hadn't sent a revelation saying you can't do it, and there was nothing in Islam saying you can't do it. So he was doing it, and it was according to his people. Does that make sense? So this Ansari says his love was so strong. He's like, I'm doing it, even though it wasn't the practice of his people. So then the Ansari says, he says, Ana dini dinak. It makes me cry sometimes. He's like, Ana dini dinak. My deen, your deen is my deen. It's like, I don't care. But I know you're a prophet and I believe in you, and that's all I care about. So sometimes we will, even though those of us that grew up Muslim, but we culture will creep into, especially post-colonization. We have a lot of cultural Islam, right? And so sometimes you have to say this, that ana dini dina, like my deen ya Rasulullah, your deen is my deen, even though there could be things that my people are practicing, which I know is it's completely against Islam. If it's within Islam, if it's within the boundaries of Islam, that's perfectly fine, right? But if it's not within the boundaries, we have to be from the people that just has to, like, ana dini dina, like it says, and Allah give us tawfiq to do that. And maybe there are people who gave him heat for that. Hey, you're the only one, and they had such a strong tribal system, right? Okay, we may have one, just our family maybe, or depending on how close we are to our relatives, who may give us some heat, right? But for them, it would be the whole tribe that would ostracize him. And the Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula, like, they were Arabs that had kings, right? But the Arabs of the Arab Peninsula, they didn't have kings. They had the tribal system. So if your tribe ostracized you, imagine like walking around in Fremont and like nobody's talking to you, or you go to the masjid and nobody looks at you. And it'd be very difficult. That's how strong, and that was from love. That has to be love, because otherwise it makes it really, really difficult. And so I just thought that was a really beautiful and sweet story. I want to come back to this because when we were doing this unit class, you remember this? Some of the scholars say that it's yes.
I apologize, but what you said really struck me, because one of the places I think that our communities could improve is in what you just said. Imagine if you walk into the masjid and no one says anything to you. And it happens all the time.
Yes.
Especially for people who are new.
Yes.
I mean, we tend to gravitate to the people we know, or to
Yes.
the communities we know, or to the languages we know, or whatever it is.
Yes.
And I think that needs to be broken.
Yes.
And we need to do what you just said. There needs to be an inclusion.
Yeah. No, absolutely no. And that's part of our jahiliyyah. There was like the initial jahiliyyah, and then there's the jahiliyyah pre-Islamic practices that are, it's basically un-Islamic practices. That's called jahiliyyah. It's the same thing, and we need to break the idols within. We don't have external idols, but we have these internal idols that we don't.
The tribalism and the
Yeah, absolutely. This nationalism
right.
is like, I'll do things like, for example, the Pakistanis, they have this tradition of people may not wear hijab, which that's fine. It's between them and Allah. I mean, it's not fine, but it's between them and Allah. But they won't wear hijab in front of non-mahram men. But they have to have their heads covered if you're reciting dua, or if you're reciting Quran. Like, they make it like it's mandatory. So I was, or they won't touch a book that has any Arabic in it. And maybe that's a little bit lesser, and they're like, oh, I don't have wudu. I mean, that might just be because they don't know if it's Quran or not, or they don't know that dua books, if it's mostly not Quran, you can touch it without wudu, or things like that, And so what I've started doing is that I've started saying, you don't have to have your head covered when you do dua. So I'm actually intentionally now trying to not wear my head covered, just to break this practice of feeling like because what if somebody comes in, they're very young, and they're wearing like jeans and they're wearing a t-shirt, and then they see all these women covered, but it's only women, and they're Muslim, and they're like, well, oh, I have to dress like this, and it's like, no, just come as you are, you're welcome. First of all, if you're not wearing that outside, and you're Muslim and you grew up Muslim, I mean, that's between you and Allah. And secondly, it's not a practice. I mean, it's not for anyway, because we're just, these things are like, so sometimes we're making actually it difficult for ourselves because we're bringing in this pre-Islamic practice and we, Allah give us tawfiq to do that. This ayat, inshallah, remind me, we'll recite this at the end. Some of the scholars said that it was recommended to recite this, and they say it's one of the means of removing tribulation, is to recite the names of the forefathers, the 21 forefathers. And there's like, I have a book that actually mentions each forefather and talks about the amazing qualities of them. In fact, one of the forefathers actually started what's Juma now. They would call it Yom Aruba. And he would actually address the people, and he would say, coming from my loins is a prophet, and he would talk about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that then became Juma later on. It was called Yom Aruba. So there's this very, very amazing things about the prophets. Stories are told right all the time. So everybody knows this is Sayyidah Khadija, the most beloved wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was very wealthy, and she gathered her tribe. They say, Allahu Alam. I mean, some people say this actually did not happen. Allahu Alam. They say all my wealth is for the Prophet. Slaves, animals, farms. Allahu Alam. I mean, some people say, well, there's a problem with this because the Prophet ﷺ didn't care about wealth anyway. So, but some people say that she said that at their wedding. But she did actually do that, even if the saying is not sound, is that she completely sacrificed everything that she had for him, and that was her love. And I thought that was so beautiful, that because she knew he was a prophet. Because there's this beautiful story about, the story about the Jewish man who in Mecca, he was there for trading, and he one day, when Sayyidah Khadija was in her home, and she had a group of women in her home, and he calls out to them, and he starts describing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to them, and telling them basically that they should be vigilant about wanting him for themselves. And they say the women threw stones at him, and just had some of the women, not Sayyidah Khadija, but they had a really bad reaction to him. But Sayyidah Khadija was just listening very, very intently. And they knew that the people of the book knew things that they didn't know, because the people of the book, they were considered up here, and the Arabs, pre-Islam, they were considered very lowly, right? They were like, nobody bothered about pre-Islam. Okay, so, and then giving up wealth, we're talking about wealth, so I put in the story. Sulaym, her name was Umaysa. She's the mother of Sayyidina Anas, who's the servant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? When her husband, the step father of Sayyidina Anas, when he wanted to marry Sulaym, right, and he wasn't Muslim, what did she say? She said, she didn't want anything. She said, my mehej is you becoming, right, which is perfectly permissible for, if a woman wants, it's a dowry that a woman has a right to get when she gets married. So, but she decided her dowry was going to be that he becomes Muslim. She didn't want any material possession. So that was like, I don't care, I just want you to be a righteous person in my home. That's all I care about in terms of what's. Okay, and then there's this really sweet story. So, on one of the skirmishes, they say you should say battles because skirmishes makes it sound like they weren't organized, but they were very organized battles. She actually has a dagger hidden inside of her, and she decides she's going to go out with the Prophet and his army. And so this is after she gets married to Abu Talha, and she's expecting, like she's pregnant. And so Abu Talha goes and he goes and complains to. So the women were strong. The women in Medina were strong because they were going out in the fields and they were working. So they would have a completely different temperament than the women in Medina because they were more cloistered. They didn't go out. So one can't expect women to be have the same demure, kind of reserved. A lot of times people will think Muslim women are going to be a certain way. Well, to some extent that's going to be true, but to some extent it depends on how your daily life is, because the Ansari women were very strong because they were working with the men in the field. So she's like, she has this dagger and she's like, I'm going to go out. So Abu Talha goes and he complains to the Prophet, like, she's going to go out with a dagger. She's expecting, right? And so the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't right away say no. He didn't say yes, but like just from his hikmah, his wisdom, he asked her what she was gonna do with the dagger, right? Like that's like, what is your intention? That's really important. So she talks about what she was gonna do if somebody came close to her and how she would use the dagger. And so the Prophet ﷺ just smiled, right? And he told Abu Talha to let her go. Now, because Abu Talha is a man, like a husband is responsible for a wife's safety, so she was going to put herself in danger, and so he was protected, which is a good thing, right? But then she really wanted to go, so once the Prophet said, let her go, then the Sahaba weren't going to say anything. And there was no way there's no way they could stop. So I just love this story. So to think that women have to be this sort of, I think there's also this kind of, sometimes it comes from the men, I think, because it makes them feel better too. But sometimes I have to be careful about this because I don't want people to go home and be fighting with their
I
husbands.
think the early women were not passive.
They weren't
Any-
exactly.
in
That's the
any
word.
way.
They weren't
They
passive.
were committed
Exactly.
and they were passionate about
Right.
their commitment
Right.
to the Prophet ﷺ
Very.
and to their belief.
Yes.
And they acted on that
Yes. Absolutely.
in different ways. but
Yes,
they-
absolutely.
They were,
They weren't Hawaii. Yeah, absolutely. No, they weren't. And one of the things I noticed that in Damascus, when I was in Damascus, is the women were more like that. They're more like that. And one of the things I noticed is that they have a very strong network of women. Like they really support each other very, very strongly. They'll correct each other also. It's a little bit intimidating. I mean, some of the teachers they'll say is, don't go out of the house until you've read Surah Al-Baqarah. Like they eventually get them so spiritually strong that then one, it helps their connection with each other because they're so spiritually strong. So it gets away. You get away from that negative insensitivity. Sometimes we can be sensitive in a good way as women, and sometimes it can backfire. So the women make them so spiritually strong. That's what the teachers do. Like I noticed in Damascus, that then they have these really strong bonds, which are much stronger than the bonds that the men have. And that's how I see the Sahabiya, the female companions were like that. That because sometimes you read stuff in the stories and you're like, wow, they said this to each other and they were still talking to each other. And I was like, that's because they just got over stuff. And we'll like hold on to astaghfirullah stuff for sometimes the rest of our lives. So Allah forgive us for that. But that's something, comes from just reading more Quran and just, purifying the heart.
This was when Mesa was expecting Ellen.
She was, no, I think she was, this was another child. Yes. There was I think she named him Abdullah. Okay. So Sayyidah Aisha's request, this is how vigilant, I love Sayyidah Aisha. I mean, I love all the wives, but I feel like just connect to her a lot more. She said she saw the Prophet ﷺ in a good state, and she wanted to take advantage of that. I mean, he was always, they say, لا يطوي عن أحد بشره, which I have to remind myself of that, because my temperament is partly choleric, partly melancholic. So this hadith is that he wouldn't turn. He never. Yatwi means literally to fold. An ahadin bishrahu. Bishrahu is your like smiling, pleasant temperament. Which
That's
if you're
fine.
melancholic, it's your smiling, pleasant temperament.
Okay.
Which if, depending on what temperament you are, that may not be your, like I have to work at that a lot more. So they say he never, irrespective of what was going on for him internally, and his worries were only about the ummah and only otherworldly, he always met people with, generally met people with a cheery disposition, right? And if he got angry, he got angry for the sake of Allah. But then he would turn away from people when he got angry. They say one of the ways, like in the Shama'il, they described him as sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The way the Sahaba knew he was angry because he wouldn't yell, is that he would grab his cloak and he would pull it away, and there was a vein also between his eyebrows that would pulse, like it was so subtle, his anger, unimaginable. One day Sayyidina Umar said, the Prophet ﷺ turned away from him, and this is Sayyidina Umar, like, right? He said, Ya Rasulullah, what is my life? He said, what is my life? And you're angry with me. SubhanAllah. And Sayyidina Umar, when he was Khalifa, he told one of the I think he was a Sahabi. He told him, he said, I'm never gonna love you. And the Sahabi said, he said, are you gonna oppress me, or are you gonna? He said, no, I'll give you, I'll give you your rights. But I'm never gonna love you because how many nights did you keep up the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam worried? And because of that, he couldn't love him. And so Allah forgive us for any nights that we kept up the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because our aqidah is that the prophets are all. I mean, everybody's alive in their graves, right? But the prophets, all the prophets are alive in their graves, right? And the Prophet ﷺ was also a martyr, because somebody who dies of poisoning, he's a martyr. And the Prophet ﷺ, wanting to get all the good deeds he could possibly and attain all the stations, he used to make dua that he would die as a martyr. And he said most of the martyrs of my ummah are in their beds. All this crazy stuff happening, we should tell them. You know what I mean? Not on the battlefield. Most of the martyrs of this ummah are in the beds. And so he died from the poisoning. And so he's considered a martyr. And in the Quran it says a martyr is alive, meaning they have a higher afterlife, meaning the quality of their afterlife is higher, but then higher than that is the quality of the afterlife of the prophets. Yeah. And he said that the actions, he said, my life is good for you and my death is good for you. My life is good for you because you تحدثون فيحدث لكم. Like you all speak, like you ask questions, and then Allah sends down revelation, but my death is good for you. So the Prophet ﷺ is all mercy. And he said, my death is good for you, right? Because your actions get shown to me, and the ulama, the scholars differed on, are they shown collectively or are they shown individually? I was like, that's sometimes scary when I think about that. And he says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if